Okay, hi everybody. So welcome to this week's weekly video, and we are heading into the final research paper. So I'm going to kind of go over what the purpose of this video is, and then we'll get started. So we're going to take a look at what the prompt is and kind of go over what is different about doing a final research paper versus our other essays. I'm going to go over what a counter argument is. This may be review, depending on which class you're in, but I think it's good to review it. We're going to look at a sample essay. We're going to look at the outline template, which is going to be the first step in this research essay process. And then we'll talk about how to do research and what resources you have. So depending on what class you're in, you may actually have a library orientation over Zoom, or you may just be having the recording sent to you. Okay, so let's get started. So why don't we look at the prompt first, and then we'll go over specifically how this essay is different. So again, depending on what class you're in, this might be your actual prompt, or the deadlines might be a little bit different, but the prompt will be the same. Okay, so the background is just general information, but basically we're using the book as our jumping off point to really talk about some universal themes that we can sort of extrapolate into all of our lives. So let's look at what the requirement is first. So it's an 8 to 10 page paper, which generally works out to be about 2,000 words as a minimum. And we're going to use some of the main themes in the book for the Other Westmore as our starting point. And so the overall question that you want to think about now, so some of you may have already finished the book, some of you may be about halfway through, but even if you haven't finished, it's good to have this overall question in your mind now. What were the most important factors that shaped these men? And so here are the different themes or factors that I want you to start playing around with. So it could be family. Do you think that was the most important factor? Role models. Environment. So environment could be the neighborhood where they lived. The school, so that would include the military school. Or do you think it was the person they were? So is it inner character, moral compass, the sort of people they were on the inside? So it could be one of these things, two of these things, all of them, any combination. Okay, that's up to you. And so you can see how these factors, family, environment, character, these are universal sort of themes and ideas that shape all of us. So they're going to be overarching themes that we can use the book for support, but we can also then start to do research about how do these factors shape all of us. We're going to take a look at that in the sample. But as a starting place, you should look at how do these factors shape these men? What were the most important factors? Which ones do you want to focus on? So that's your starting point. Okay, and then let's look at the criteria for grading before we jump back over to basically how do we start approaching this essay. So it's going to look similar to what we've been working on all semester. So of course you need a clear thesis, and we'll talk about how your introduction can look different. You need a clear argument. So this is overall, there's really no difference to what we've been working on all semester, and really the skills we have been working on is leading us to this point. So you still want to have an argument. What factors are you arguing are the most important? That's your argument. You still want to have high paragraphs, and we're going to talk about how that's going to shift a little bit as far as the layout, but you still have high paragraphs, you still want to have transitions. We're going to talk about a counter argument, a hook, conclusion, hook in the intro, conclusion with the so what. You want to have clear sentences. You want to at least have 3 quotations from the book. And then what's different is you want to have at least 4 resources or research from the West Valley Library. So you should have at least 4 quotes minimum. So 1 from each of those sources. You can of course have more. And so that's where you're going to do your outside research of how are these factors affecting all of us? How are these universal factors? So let's say you focus on family. How does a person's family affect us as we grow up, or how does it shape us throughout our lives in general? That's sort of your research overall. So as you learn how to do research, the research articles don't have to be about the book, because that's going to be too hard to do. So specifically, they don't have to be about the book. Your research should actually be more general, more universal. Okay, so that's going to make it a lot easier for you to do. And then, of course, you need an MLA works cited. So let's go back to kind of the overview of how is this paper different overall. And then it will help once we look at the sample. But now that you have to sort of think about getting to 8 pages, you want to think about it more. I'm actually going to come down to this one. That each factor you're going to focus on. So let's say you want to focus on, I don't know, family, role models, and inner character, like the people they were the most guiding factors or influential factors for these men. Each of these factors will now be a section of your essay instead of a paragraph. And each section is going to be like a mini essay comprised of several paragraphs. So you're basically just going to write more about each factor. So if it was a shorter essay, you would just do 1 paragraph about family and 1 paragraph about role models. But now you're going to elaborate and expand, and it's going to become a section. So you might just explain and analyze how family was important for the author, how family was important for the other Westmore, and then also bring in how family affects all of us with your research. So it might be 3 paragraphs. Okay, so it becomes a whole section. Going along with that, you can now choose to do 1 or 2 paragraphs for your introduction. So it depends, again, if you have a lot of definitions, if you want to go into more depth about the context of your overall argument before leading to your thesis, you now have some sort of academic freedom, some leeway to expand your introduction. You don't have to, but you can. The other difference is that you're not just picking quotes from the book or whatever, the article in the past. You are now being asked to go on your own and find research that you want to include. And the other thing that's a little bit different is you're now including a counter-argument if it's appropriate. So that is one way to get to a longer essay. So I do want to encourage you. We're going to look at a sample that doesn't have a counter-argument. So why don't we actually look at the sample first, and then we'll come back around to how you could include a counter argument. Okay, so let's do that. So this is going to be in Canvas. So this person only has one intro, one paragraph for the intro. I'm not going to go over it word for word. I'm just going to point out a few things. So she doesn't list all of the factors. You can, or you can just have a more broad intro. So she actually connects the book to success. So she actually creates a couple of the themes that we talked about. So her thesis is, even if you aren't born into a privileged life, there are different contributing factors to help us lead a more meaningful and successful life. So she has a more broad thesis, and that is fine. Okay, but what I really want to point out are she now has sections. So I believe she does it chronologically. Maybe not. Let us see. So her first section is youth development. So you can actually do a header, and whereas before this would just be one paragraph, she now has a whole section on this is a factor about environment. And she has multiple paragraphs about how different environments shape us. So it says, from a young age, our character begins to shape and change due to environments around us. So this one looks like it's about hostile environments. This one includes outside research about, I think, how nurturing environments. This one is about how environmental effects can change our perspective of success. So each paragraph has a different point about environment. So this whole section is about, I would say, environmental effects on youth development. Okay. So she has research. This is a block quote. I'll send out some information about that when we get closer to writing the draft. In this whole section, actually, I don't see anything about the other Wes Moore. So she's really just setting up the context of her overall argument about the importance of environment, and you can completely do it that way. She's now moving on to role models. So this is a whole section about role models. So this first one is her point is role models in our life heavily influence our ideas and beliefs on what we deem successful. And now she's getting into how this connects to the book specifically. And here we have a point here, a key factor which really altered the difference between them were the role models they were provided at a young age. So for her, in the first section, she sort of set up her overall context about environment and how that connects to youth development overall with her outside research. Then in her second section, she moves specifically into how does that relate and show up in the book with role models. She has different paragraphs about that. Here's one about positive role models, how that relates to success and ambition. And then she moves on to fixed mindset and grit. And then she sort of widens the lens again and starts to bring in, she actually brings in depending on which class you're watching this from. Brainology, one of our earlier articles about how mindset connects to success. So there are multiple paragraphs about that. Then she connects back to her original thesis about you don't have to be privileged in order to be successful, that these factors of environment, role models, mindset, these are what really can put us on the right track. So she has woven outside research to prove that argument, and then also had a section about the book to prove that argument. So it's really up to you. I'm going to escape out of this. It's really up to you to structure the sections the way that fits your argument best. You could have the book woven throughout each section. You can have the book in one section in the beginning and then move on to your research. You can have the book in your last section, and it really just depends. So the layout of it is up to you. You just need to sort of think about what do you want to argue overall, and then start to work on the flow of how does the book fit with your research. And so you have a lot of freedom to decide how do you want the flow to be. So that I would encourage you to really look at the sample, see how she laid it out, and then ask yourself, is this how I want to do it, or do I want to play around with the layout a little bit differently? So I'm just going to show a review of how you can also incorporate a counter argument. So if this is review for you, you can feel free to skip forward a little bit. I'll put timestamps and everything. But just as a reminder, some people kind of say, is it a good idea to include a counter argument? Does it weaken your argument? No, it makes it stronger because it gives you a chance to think about the opposition and show that you are a reasonable person to consider both sides of the debate. So where does it go? So it can go anywhere. You could have just one paragraph be your counter argument within a section. So you can think about a section that you're pretty clear on what the opposition might be, and then just include a paragraph after that. So it can go anywhere, you just don't want it to be in the conclusion. It has to be a body paragraph. Okay, so I'm including some sentence starters here to show you how to actually write a counter argument. So you can do it all in one paragraph, or you can do transition and make it 2 paragraphs. It depends on how much you have to say. So here's a very basic one. Counter argument is, again, you're summarizing the opposition. So let's say this is the author. Friedman may argue that, and then you summarize what the opposition is. And so basically you just want to make it clear that it's somebody else's point of view. And here are several different sentence starters if you don't want to use that one. You can say, many people believe that, it is often thought that, it might seem that. And so you can bring up a factor that you disagree with. Like if you think environment is not a factor that contributed to the people that they are, you can say, many people believe that environment is an important factor that shapes who we are. And then you can move into your rebuttal, where you're saying that you're proving them wrong. And then really the easiest way to prove them wrong is start with a transition and say, however, maybe provide some research, right? However, it's been proven that environment is not a contributing factor to shape us as human beings or something. So this is the most basic format. If you want to get a little more sophisticated, here is another way to structure it. You can say opponents may claim that, and summarize that point of view. Their evidence is, so you can do a summary, you can do a quote, and then you can show maybe that you are reasonable and agree with it a little bit. So you can say, well, it may be true that environment does have a small impact. Nonetheless, it is not the main factor that shapes who we are. So these are a way to add a paragraph to your argument and show another point of view, but maybe not agree with it completely. Okay, so the last thing I want to do is, well, almost last thing, is to show you basically what the first step is to work on your outline. So again, this will be in Canvas. And this is a pretty similar outline to what we have been working on. It's just now created into sections. So you're going to just copy over the prompt. It's basically what are the factors that shape these men. And if you want to tweak the prompt, you can do that. You just have to talk to me. So I just want you to copy over the overall question again. I want you to start playing around with what your thesis is. To put some bullet points of like what are the ideas you're going to talk about in your intro. And then I want you to think about, do you have a lot to say in your intro? Do you want to do 1 or 2 paragraphs? And then I want you to start to map out basically how are you going to create your sections. So again, I would say look at the sample again and start to think, what are the big ideas? Like, are you going to talk about family here, and role models here, and environment here? And then within the big section, what are your paragraphs going to be focused on? So for both classes, this isn't due for a few weeks, but I want you to start thinking about it now since this is your final paper and it's worth 250 points. So I would start thinking about where you're headed. And the last thing is, again, depending on what class you're in, one of our librarians is going to lead us through a library orientation about how to search for the research Monday, April 27th at 12:30 over Zoom. And if this is not the class you're in, it will be recorded, and I'm going to send it out to all the classes I have so that you can watch it at your leisure. And there's also a YouTube tutorial about how to search the database too. So you can start looking at that as well. So I think this is enough to get us started, probably more than enough. I would say the main thing is read through the prompt, read through the sample, and just start to see if you can get your ideas together for your outline. And then in the coming weeks, I'm going to be offering you one-on-one Zoom office hours so that you can talk through your ideas with me as you start planning out your outlines and your drafts. Okay, so I'm going to end that here, and I'll see you guys online. Bye.